in Japan, the career paths were so different. And as you know, I run a Japan board diversity network of women, and almost, if not 100%, probably almost, my members all either studied in the United States or they worked for a gaishike, a foreign company. And why is that? It's because they didn't have the chance really to succeed in a Japanese company. So women in Japan actually bring much different experiences.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to the female leadership, because it's been quite a long time to be said that Japanese companies boardroom needs diversity and leadership altogether. Yet 1/3 of the Japanese Tosho Ichibu, Tokyo Exchange First Section companies do not have any female board members, according to data from the Japanese officials in 2021. How do you see this status quo?
Okay, so I see the situation as Japan is lagging behind, right? Objectively, the percentage of women on boards is much lower than other countries. And I can also objectively say that, Japan didn't meet its goal of 10% female board directors set by the 2015 Gender Equality Plan. So I can look at that objectively. Now, am I surprised? No, I say, okay, I might actually expect that. So why might I expect that? Well, first, understanding Japanese culture and how there were few chances for women in the workforce early on, the paternalistic culture, and the late long hours that restricted and made it more difficult for women to succeed. I can understand that. But moreover, I can actually understand that because there's no quota in Japan, right? No quota. Even the corporate governance code, which is comply or explain. So again, a soft recommendation, which some may interpret as a law, but it's not a law, does not even recommend one woman. And for our audience who may not have read the corporate governance code, the reference in there indicates that a recommendation that companies should consider diversity, including gender and international experience. It does not say companies should consider having at least one female on the board. So when I think the inclusion is so light in the corporate governance code, there's no quota. And then you can say, well, yeah, but what about investors? Haven't investors been pressing this issue? No, not until recently. So in the past several years, investors have been pressing the issue, but it's only been the past couple of years. Some of the early adopters, like Goldman Sachs, very good, State Street said they were going to have a quota for Japan. I believe that began in 2022. But if you even look then, these are still recent. We're just, 2022, 2021. And for the investors that did come out with a policy, it was limited. I think it was, and I'm not 100% sure with Elgin, right? They had a policy, but it only pertained to the Topics 100. So there was some pressure, but only on the top companies. Now, I think since that time, Elgin has actually expanded its universe, but they're starting just in the past year or two. They started with a smaller universe. And now, if we really want to understand, ISS has actually just come out with their proposed policy for Japan, and that starts in 2023. So that policy is for one woman. So given that there hasn't really been pressure by the majority of investors as reflected, because ISS does not make its policy by itself, it's informed by its its clients' views, then why would we be like, oh, we just expected Japan to change without too much pressure? And you add to that, change is hard. I never look at Japan and say anything is wrong. I say, wow, it's really hard. Men and women, different circles. This is how it's been their whole life. You understand it's important, but how important, and cognitive diversity and gender bias and all of these new concepts are being thrown at you, and you somewhat understand it, but not fully. and then you need to get on with running your business. So I say that it's completely understandable. And if you ask me in 3 years, am I surprised that most Japanese companies only have one female? I'll probably say, well, that's what they were asked mostly to do. And some investors are starting, really progressive investors. I've talked to some investors in the UK, and they're trying to push Japan for the second female. But unless the standards are raised and it becomes a high priority for the number to actually get higher, you've got like the 30% club and things like that, then I think the progress is still going to be maybe, to the level of what's going to get measured.
Talking about the Tokyo Stock Exchange, it's going through the restructuring, and many of ex-Tosho Ichibu companies are through to the Prime division, and many critics are saying that it's not, this restructuring is not that meaningful because it's not shaking off the companies enough. My question would be, could you share your view on what female leaders brings to the board? Because we've seen many soft law changes or enactment of these, but in recent years. But I think we also need to have a mindset change.
Okay, thank you. And yes, I mean, I'm actually very excited for the prime market restructuring. And I hear that there's still a time period for which they can be in compliance, because many companies are still maybe not in compliance with all of the standards. But for your question, you're not the first one to ask this question, but my response is going to be, why do we even need to ask? Do we walk around? Why are men important for boards? Of course we don't ask that, right? So you stop and say, so the question actually has to be asked, because this is the mindset of many people around the world. Why do we have to add women? Well, we're not asking you to add women. We're asking you to have a diversity of skills. And why it's more like, why aren't you including women in the pool of director candidates? And it has to be a conscious decision given how Japan has progressed to date. And we have the same situation in the US, right? We had all white male boards, and who is a white male board going to pick to be on their board? Probably one of their white male friends that they know from their close-knit circle that they play golf with. And that's just kind of how it's been. But in the US also, over the past few years, we've had to ask that question, but now we don't really ask that question. Nobody would even, we can't ask, why do we need women? We have to say, which women can we add, and go from there. So putting that aside, what do women bring to a board? Well, first, they bring the same skills that men bring. That's one thing. There are women lawyers, there are women financial experts, there are women today who there's probably as many women in ESG. I'm just guessing, so I could be wrong. There are women in, HR positions and human capital and digital transformation. So the first thing women bring to the board is their skills. And that may, and I really feel strongly about that. But if you want to say all else equal, two people, same skills, what do women bring in addition to skills is different experiences. And this is actually particularly true in Japan. In the United States, or probably in Europe, I'm from the United States, so I know much more about the US. But I believe the situation in Europe was much more parity even than the US. Women and men they weren't completely different career paths. Whereas in Japan, the career paths were so different. And as you know, I run a Japan board diversity network of women, and almost, if not 100%, probably almost, my members all either studied in the United States or they worked for a gaishike, a foreign company. And why is that? It's because they didn't have the chance really to succeed in a Japanese company. So women in Japan actually bring much different experiences. Now, what do they not have? They don't have 30 years of experience in a Japanese company. So if you need that, you probably already have that by virtue of your other eight or 10 board members. But they bring the fact that they went overseas, they had the diverse experiences, they may have started their own companies, they worked for foreign companies. And so the cognitive diversity or the way of thinking of Japanese women is very different, I think, than what a Japanese man might have. And so cognitive diversity, which is a common word now, so I'm not sure of your listenership, but I'm guessing many of them will have heard that term. It's not only brought by gender, but gender is one way to get that. And in Japan, I think gender brings that more than in other countries, just because the roles of women and men have been so different over the years. I have more. So with I think what a woman also brings, if we're going to go beyond the skills, beyond the different way of thinking, different way of solving problems, is that, you know, women also bring that representation that motivates the workforce. And if you're a woman in a company and you see an all-male board and all-male executive directors, you know, it's hard to say, wow, I've got a great chance here. It can be quite demoralizing. But once you see that, then you start to say, okay, they actually are committed to change. And maybe I could do that someday. And it's the same whether it's a executive director or a board member, but when they see the promotion, women start to get motivated and you can start to promote women. The female board directors today, and I look at it as a tremendous responsibility and a tremendous opportunity. I mean, they are in the seats right now where they can make it a little bit better for the next generation, and they can also be the voice on their boards to promote diversity.